topics does not have any connectivity. So it would be easier to catch hold of each particular topic for each session. Probably today's session, I will complete the domain name system. Maybe I'll give an introduction to one more topic, that is the ATM networks. Let us see, if time permits, we'll go into the ATM networks also, right? So I'm at the application layer. So whatever we are dealing is with respect to the issues of the application layer. As you already know, application layer is the part wherein which the user actually interfaces the application level program, right? So one such particular concept what we have to understand is the issues related to the domain name system, or you can also call this domain name system or the DNS or the domain name space. Fine. Okay. So most of you are aware of what is a domain name system, but in depth, let us try to figure out it. What is exactly a domain name system? So basically, it is a theoretical concept. So please concentrate on each and every word what I would like to discuss. Right. So basically, this is an issue at the application layer, as I have mentioned, and there are several such application programs which will be running at the application layer. Just to name some of the application level programs, it could be FTP, it could be your email, it could be your HTTP, anything you name, or anything that supports other application program category would be the issues related at the application layer. Now, why we have selected the domain name system is very similar analogy with respect to our phone book. Just imagine your mobile phones. In the mobile phones, what is the issue we have? We can never remember all the 600 names. For example, 600 names are stored in our phone book. You are not remembering all these 600 numbers, right? So instead, what you do, you save this according to the alphabets or according to the names. So names are the one which are easily understandable, and it is human readable, and also memory wise it is easy to remember. A very simple issue. So instead of remembering the numbers, what we are trying to remember here is the names. The names are nothing but which are user friendly. So very similar analogy you put into our application layer program, right? So let us see what exactly a DNS is, and why we need the concept of this DNS. Is the screen visible? Anyone? Because I've written this.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Basically, why we need a domain system, and as I gave you just an example,
Ma'am,
very
put it in
similar.
full screen mode.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Now? Yeah, now?
Yes, ma'am.
I think most of you will use mobiles. That is a problem. Okay, never mind. Okay, so basically now why we are going for this domain name system, just an analogy very similar to our phone book, right? So just to give a theoretical explanation on this particular domain name system, a domain name system would be a supporting program that is used by any other program such as emails, or in another way I can say that a domain name system is used to map any alias address to an IP address. Very simple. Alias address is nothing but the user address, what I am referring to here. Right? So a user who is using this particular any alias address has to be mapped with something called as the IP address. The concept is similar here. For example, the user is accessing something called as www.gmail.com. So the user access this address as an alias address, and there should be a mapping done from this alias address into an IP address. So from where could I fetch this IP address to the user? Now, for example, I am the user. I want to access this particular web page, which is that web page www.gmail.com. So in order to access this particular web page, as an example, I've given here ABC, never the mind. Okay. So if in order to access this www.gmail.com, now I have to go somewhere. I have to just put a query such that it has to go and search what would be the IP address for this www.gmail.com. So what is that I'm trying to do? I'm trying to map an alias address into an IP address, and this mapping is nothing but finding the domain name address of this particular IP address, whatever just now I specified, www.gmail.com, right? So what is that? from where I'm trying to map this, or how your computer knows that www.gmail.com has some IP address, right? So how is that done? As basically we have something called as a table. Let me call it as a file table, right? So what I have an entries of all the alias names. I'm making it simpler. Still, I'm at the need. I have not gone to the working, and still I have not gone into the depth of the DNS. Right now, please imagine there is a server wherein which we have stored all these alias names, and to this particular alias name the respective IP address, right? So what is that I have to get it from this particular table is I have to get that ABC, that is an user alias name, is based on IP address 19.20. Sorry, this is 21 dot. Now, probably you can make this as 21.32.2. Forget about this one. Okay, so 19.21.32.2 would be an IP address for ABC, right? So from this table, the user will fetch the IP address, and the necessary application program will be going on. For example, what I'm fetching the web pages, so the necessary application program will be running there, and I'll get for this particular web page, I'll get what is the IP address, and the necessary connection would be established at the lower layers. You know which are the lower layers. I will directly jump to the transport layer, where either I go with a UDP connection or a TCP connection, right? So this is the need, uh, that why we need an domain name system. That is, it's very easier for us to remember the names, but when a user wants to fetch that particular address, that means it has to be mapped to an IP address. So that mapping is done through this particular domain name system. But initially, at the start of the internet, what happened was all these entries was very simple at the start of the internet I'm speaking about, right? So this file was restricted, and it would just type some alias address, and based on this alias address there would be given an IP address for this, right? So it was very easier to for a user to fetch this particular names from the table and retrieve whatever the necessary information was there. But what happened as the internet grew, or as the number of website increases, right? So this is not a restriction, right? This has to be increased. I'm relating with the entire internet throughout the geographical area, that is the entire world is been connected to this, right? So as the number of website increases, to make such type of a file would be a tedious job. And also, if I made this to be centralized, here also the problem would arise, because centralized when it is centralized also, fetching the IP address out of so many names would be a tedious job. So for this, what they did is they created something called as the DNS. That is, whenever the host needs the mapping, then it will contact to the closest computer in its vicinity. And remember, when I mean DNS, this entire table, whatever the entry, would be divided into different computers and placed individually few set of information in each particular computers. You can call it as a router, you can call it as an intelligent device, you can call name anything you could name it for that particular device, right? So what is that? The domain name system was created, and the host that needs the mapping, the host which needs the mapping, can contact to the closest particular computer, and from the table it can fetch whatever the information it was supposed to get. So this is how the structure of dividing the entire namespace was being made, right? So now, since it was a very large uh, what do I say, a very tedious job, we divided into something called as levels, or we divided into something called as hierarchy, right? So this is where our domain name system evolved. So let me go into a very simple example, or a working of a domain name system. You know all these things, but still, probably in terms of networking terminology, the understandability should be increased. So that is why we are going for this topic, that is a domain name system, right? Now, if I go with the working of a domain name, so what are the basic elements I need for the domain name system to be enabled, right? So as I told, I am the user, want to fetch some web pages. Once again, let me go with yahoo.com, right? So I have a host name. What is that host name? The host name is yahoo.com, and you know that the entire application layer, basically I'm in the application layer, and you know that the entire application is based on the client server model scenario, And when I mean a client server model scenario, you know that I need to have a client as well as I need to have a server, right? So if I take an example of an FTP, I want to use this particular thing, then I have a FTP client, right? So then I have a DNS client and I have a DNS server. Remember, the host name would be sent from an user. That is, how do we communicate? Is we communicate with the transport layer by getting the IP address for this particular host name. Remember, communication is established at the lower layer, that is at the transport layer itself. So this transport layer needs an IP address for what? For this particular host name. So how do I get this IP address? As first I put a query to the FTP client. So how does the user communicate us? With the help of the alias name. So what is that alias name I am having? The alias name is the host name, right? Example, www.yahoo.com is the host name, whatever I'm having, right? Hence, we have to find the IP address for this particular host name. Then what will happen? The task is, first the user provides this host name to the FTP client. That is, it queries to this particular FTP client. Then this FTP client queries. Please see the numbering, whatever I have given. So first is the host name. Then the host name is put as a query from an FTP client to a DNS client. So now the DNS client will take this host name. It is not brilliant enough to fetch back the IP address of this host name. So what it will do? It will put a query to the DNS server. Now, upon receiving this query, you know what does a query refers to. So then what will happen? It searches in its table, and you know there are n number of entry in this DNS server, and you know at the background there will be several programs being running. So just in the search space, it will check what would be the IP address for this particular host name, and it gives a response. You know that a client server model is based on query as well as a response. So it will give a response. So what it will give as a response is the IP address. Then after receiving this particular response, the DNS client would give the IP address to the FTP client. Now, what this FTP client will do, where is the actual communication being taking place? The actual communication is being taking place at the transport layer. Don't forget. So this DNS client sends the IP address to the FTP client, and then finally the FTP client makes a connection by passing the particular IP address to this particular transport layer. So this is how your working of DNS can be enabled. So now I have gotten, for this particular www.yahoo.com, I have got an IP address. Let me call the IP address to be 192.132.2.1, from where by putting the query from a DNS client to a DNS server. Right. So though it seems to be simple, but probably within a fraction of a second we can get it connected to the web pages. How we are getting us the entire services based on this particular architecture. Now, once you are aware of this particular working and the need, let us go with how we can establish a namespace, whether it is based on a hierarchical strategy or whether it is based on a flat name strategy. All these things let us analyze. So now, what did I finish? Just I finished with the issues related to the need, as well as with a related issue with the what is that? How would the DNS work with, right? So this is once again an example of a DNS service. So what is that? A user is trying to map an alias address. What is that alias address? A person at wonderful.com. This particular diagram I have taken from the Frozen. This a person at wonderful.com would be mapped with this particular IP address 200.200.200.5, and you know the complete process. So I have a, now basically what is that? Which is that client I'm referring to? SMTP, a simple mail transfer protocol. So this particular client will query the DNS client, then the DNS client will query the DNS. Sorry, this should be a server, and upon receiving this, it searches in its search page the what is that? The IP address for this wonderful.com, and then a connection is established at the transport layer through this IP address 200.200.200.5. Right. Now, Let us see what does the namespace refers to. Is it visible? Because I have written it. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Um, see what does the namespace refers to and how we are organizing this particular domain name system into something called as hierarchy level, or something called as level what is that 14 level hierarchies, etc., etc., right? So basically, what does the namespace refers to, and what should be the characteristics of this particular namespace? So the namespace must be unique, as we know that individually we have our own names, which is very unique. Similarly, the namespace must be unique because your addresses as name of that particular department as ABC, HOD, CSE, right? Now, similarly, XYZ, if I want to contact to the admin, let me name it as XYZ admin, and anything, go on adding to this, right? So this refers to a flat namespace. When I mean a flat namespace, remember, here the name is assigned to an address, and the name in this space is a sequence of characters without structure. I don't have any structure here. It is flat. So what do I have? I have a CSE as a department. I have an IT as a department. I have EC as a department, etc., etc. I need to uniquely represent this. So how do I uniquely represent this? I have given ABC as the HOD name for CSE. Similarly, some PQR for IT, etc., etc. So these are unique names, but they are flat. That means that they don't have any structure, right? So the other way of naming is, one more is through hierarchical namespace. So in this, the name is made up of several parts. So when I mean an hierarchy, it is very much simple for you. Everything is will be now in the form of an hierarchy. So in this, authority to assign and control namespace can be decentralized. So what was our problem? Our problem was, if we are going to have n number of such unique namespace, then I can't make it as centralized. Now I can make it as decentralized by going to this particular hierarchical structure. So what is that? The hierarchical structure has made something unique way of representing in the level forms, right? Your flat name structures cannot be used for large organization, remember, because more number of entries, more number of problems added into the domain name system. So in spite of going for this, we go with an hierarchical name system because the name space itself is divided into structure, into what we call it as structures or hierarchy. So let me take an example of our own college. I've just divided it into department and admin, and here I can go on giving names for n number of departments from A to Z I can have, and the HOD names I can give from A to Z. Similarly, the admin names. So everything I have made it structuralized, and it is hierarchical. And the efforts are also being reduced in case of this particular what do I say, hierarchical level of representation. Whereas in this flat name, as the number of entries increases, the job of searching the alias address with an IP address would be tedious. Hence, it is not preferred for a very large system. It is only preferred. This type of namespace is only preferred for a small organization, right? So, but when it comes to World Wide Web, then I have to go with this hierarchical structure. So is it clear? So let us go or learn some more terminologies with respect to this particular DNS. Now, based on the flat name as well as the hierarchical, your DNS is designed to have an hierarchical namespace. So what do I need to remember in this particular hierarchical namespace? So in this, the namespace is defined as an inverted tree. Please remember this. All these things would be very important for your quiz point of view. So here, the namespace is defined in an inverted tree structure with the root at the top. I'll take an example with the root at the top. Just remember this point. tree can have only 128 level. So you can put a question that why only the tree, this tree would have 128 levels. It all depends on the RFCs. Basically the standard defines it to be 128 level, and it also depends upon the decoding and the encoding schemes whatever we apply. So based on that, we have level 0 as the root level, and level 127 as the deepest uh, deepest namespace, right? So in this, remember 128 level in which 0 is the root and 127 is the deepest namespace, right? So now let me take an example. So I told you we have a root label. So now this root label is nothing but an empty string or a null character. So before I start, let me name one more parameters. So which are the parameters what we have to remember in case of the domain namespaces? Something called as a label. In that comes a root label, and one more is the domain name. So I have to identify a domain name for each particular tree structure, right? So let me define what is a label, what is the domain name, and what is a domain. Just now I spoke 128 levels are there. In that level 0 is the root level, and we can go with the highest, that is 127. So 0 to 127 is 128. Remember why 128? It is once again based on the RFCs, based on the standard, and based on what type of compression and encoding and decoding format we are referring with respect to. I'll not go in depth with respect to why it is 128 level. Once again, that story is a big story, right? So at this point, it only is based, everything is structuralized and everything is based on the RFCs, right? Now, let me name, yeah, one second, I missed something. Yeah. What does a label refers to? What does a domain name refers to? Now if you just uh, go from the, now for this particular route, I have divided into two sub particular domain. Let me name that as, for my convenience, let me name it as edu, and one more is org. Edu refers to education and org refers to organization. Later I'll come for that, right? So I have a root what do I say, root label. In the root label, this root label is nothing but a null string or a null character. And remember, when I mean null or an empty string, so that is one from where I am starting with. So when I am referring with respect to a label, each node, oh God, am I able to connect? I have only another 10 minutes. Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I have another 10 minutes. I didn't initiate one more session. Sorry. I think I have to wind up within 10 minutes. Okay. So when I mean a label, I am referring to what each node in a tree has a label. So these are nothing but your labels. Sorry. My system is hanging. Yeah. So each particular node in a tree has a label, right? So keep one more point in your mind. This label are nothing but string of characters. These labels are nothing but string of characters, and this should be of maximum of 63 characters. Once again, it is defined by your RFCs only. This should be of 63 characters maximum, right? When I mean a root label is nothing but a null label to which a children node is being attached. So this edu and organizations are nothing but the labels, or I can call it as the children node to this particular root node. Similarly, further I divide this nodes into ABC, XYZ as a names, right? And G. Now, for example, if I want to know the domain name of G, then the domain name of G is, as I told you, we are reading it in an inverted tree structure with the root at the top. So I have to read it from the back so that I get a domain name for this particular G. G can be anything. Here G can itself be Ramya, or it could be Rakshak, anything, right? It is a unique name, right? So now when I am reading this inverted domain name for this particular structure, then it would be, of course, it is separated by a dot, G dot. What is the next label I have? XYZ dot. What is the next label I have? ABC dot. What is the next label I have? EDU dot. This dot represents this for us the end of the domain name, that is, this represents the root. This dot represents the root. Similarly, for this particular XYZ, if I want to know the domain name, then it will be XYZ. What is the next one? Dot ABC. Next one, dot edu. And this represents the end or the root. Similarly, for ABC, it would be abc.edu dot, and for edu, it will be edu. And what are all these things? These things are nothing but your domain names. So got an idea? So how do we get a domain name? Based on the tree structure, in which the root is at the top and the children nodes are the next. If I want to know a domain name of a particular child node, then I have to read it in a inverted tree structure, right? So with this, you know what is a label now, you know what is a root label. Let me go directly into what does a namespace refers to. So I have to be unique. So when this namespace has to be unique with respect to the IP address, then I can, as I told you, I can either represent in a flat namespace or in an hierarchical frame structure. So based on this, we have the domain names classified as FQDN as well as PQDN. Very important. FQDN is nothing but fully qualified domain name, and PQDN is nothing but partially qualified domain name. Fine. So here, in a fully qualified domain name, in this, label is terminated by a null string. In this, the label is not terminated by a null string. When I mean a null string, this is what I am referring with respect to. So this is a fully qualified domain name. So if I remove this, then it would be a partially qualified domain name. What an idea? So it is based on the uniqueness, we have defined it as fully qualified and partial qualified. So if anything is terminated with a null string, then it is fully qualified, which is not terminated, then it is a partially qualified. So this contains full name of a host, starts from the node, but does not reach the node. Got an idea? So if I have a dot, then I'm going till the root node. If I don't have a dot, I'm not going till the root node. This is the difference. So with this idea, I have just spaced few FQDN names and few PQDN names. Can you make out? So without a null string, without a null string, this is a PQDN, and with a null string, these are FQDN. So some problems I have attached here is asking you to determine which of the following is an FQDN and which is a PQDN. Can you name? X is an FQDN or a PQDN? Yes, anyone?
It's a PQDN.
Yes. The B, XXX dot YYY dot. Sorry.
It's an FQDN.
Yes. The third one, C.
PQDN.
I don't have a null, so PQDN. The last one,
FQDN.
yes. Similarly, here also the first one is FQDN. The second one is FQDN. Third one is
PQDN.
fourth one is PQDN. Yeah,
PQDN.
one more type. Yeah, one more type of a problem I have. Just read this. Are you able to make out?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if a DNS domain name is, please read this. If a DNS domain name is voyager.fhda.edu. How many labels are involved? Question is, how many labels are involved and how many level of hierarchies are there? Can anybody give me the answer? Just now I told you what is a label. How many labels are there?
4, ma'am.
3
How
months.
it is?
3 labels and 4 levels.
Yes, 3 labels and 4
Levels.
hierarchies. Why
Hierarchy
3
level.
labels is, why the 3 labels is Voyager is one label, FHDA is one label, and EDU is one label. Now, when I mean an hierarchy, if this dot was not there, then I would have add just 3 level of hierarchy. That is, I have to read it from the bottom till the root node. How do I read? Voyager is the first one, FHDA is the second one, and EDU is the third one. Now, since I have a dot, I have one more level because I'm going till the root. So, how many level of hierarchies have? 4 level of hierarchy. 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of hierarchy and 3 levels of names. Is this clear?
Yes,
Yeah, I
ma'am.
just have, the answers also I've given. You can refer this when I share the slides. I just have 2 minutes. Do you have any doubts? I'll continue with the domain and how the domain structure has been organized in the next class. Do you have any doubt apart from this?
No, ma'am.
Was this understandable?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just 2 minutes is there. So I'll continue with the domain name system only in the next class. According to the timetable only I'm going. So I think tomorrow I have somewhere around, I don't remember. What is the timetable tomorrow's? Yes, anyone? Prajwal? I
12:30,
think we
ma'am.
have at, okay, I'll
Yes, ma'am.